and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. I wish we were not doing this the day before the Republican debates.
I know.
They've been so annoying in the way they've scheduled this on a Thursday night.
Don't they know our schedule?
Please do subsequent debates on Tuesday night so we can be up to date and discussing it on the show.
And turn our monitor on.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yes.
So we can figure out what camera to look at.
So we'll have that analysis for you next week. We have some words to say about political candidates this week.
And what the Republicans are up to.
Right. But we start with the horrible story that you all are probably aware of by now about how an ultra-orthodox fanatic stabbed 6 people at the Jerusalem Pride Parade, killing 16-year-old Shira Banki. This guy was out of prison for just 3 weeks for making the same kind of attack 10 years ago.
And the stories of violence continue here in the United States. A gay man on Staten Island was beaten by cops shouting anti-gay slurs at him.
In Manhattan, New York, a gay couple bashed back against a gay basher.
And a terrible story out of Georgia where a gay man was murdered by his partner's ex-boyfriend, who then killed himself.
New national guidelines have been issued for keeping transgender students safe in schools.
Jamaica holds its first Pride celebration, Uganda its 4th.
Caitlyn Jenner has shown her true political colors in her new series.
Not a pretty picture. We will discuss that eventually. And we'll preview the new films Stonewall, about the 1969 rebellion, and Freeheld, about a New Jersey police officer's fight for recognition of her partnership, with an all-star cast.
Yeah.
But we start in Jerusalem and this terrible, terrible story. They're holding the Pride Parade.
Always controversial.
Yes,
in
certainly.
Jerusalem.
Yep.
In fact, the police set up a perimeter around it, and actually there are apparently no spectators at this parade. They just march through empty streets because of it is resented by some ultra-religious people.
One of whom, 10 years ago, attacked the parade with a knife. A guy who stabbed 3 people at that point and was arrested, convicted, sent to jail.
Sentenced to 12 years, and then the Supreme Court said after 10 years, well, we revised that sentence.
Well, 10, 12, whatever. But he got out 3 weeks ago, and he started making public inflammatory statements again.
Yes, he did.
There was certainly no rehabilitation in prison for this guy. He wrote a letter about how it was necessary to stop this parade.
Right.
He went on the radio and gave an interview about how, this was horrible and demonic and
abomination.
Yes, and must be stopped. And he went back to the parade with a knife and managed to stab 6 people this time. We have a picture of him actually in the act stabbing people.
His name is Yishai Schlissel. He's a Haredi and ultra-orthodox. Now, obviously a horrifying bloody scene. And one of the people that he went after was a straight ally, a girl, because she's 16 years old, named Shira Banki,
Shira Banki.
Shira Banki,
Yeah.
16 years old, who died of the wounds a couple of days later. Her parents, made a statement saying, she was standing up for her friends. We love her. She was doing what she felt was right. There was no recriminations over her participation in the thing. But this has sparked sort of did we show the picture of her?
Yes.
This has sparked sort of obviously international attention, but also it comes in the wake of some settlers on the West Bank attacking a Palestinian home and killing, burning down the home of a family. 3 of them are still in the hospital with horrible burns, and their infant child died.
Yeah.
So there were these peace marches all over Israel as a result of this, linking the two things and putting them together. And I mean, every official in the country participated in these things and decried
and
them,
issued statements
decried
and
the violence.
Rallies by thousands of people all over the country. So it certainly has had an effect. I don't know that it's changed anyone's mind.
Well, the police were not tracking this guy. They did allow 30 anti-gay demonstrators in to protest what they call the Abomination Parade.
They do that in New York, too.
Yes, and
I'm not saying they should track him once he gets out of prison, except that he was making public threats.
Yes.
That's the reason
Yes.
he should have been tracked.
Yes.
And he wasn't, and he showed up with his knife after his very public threats and managed to get to people.
You know, they call
Another of whom is still very
Yes.
seriously injured.
Yes, but the protesters did condemn the stabbings. How's that? But they are saying this is an abomination, and of course the Levitical.
This meaning us and the Pride Parade.
Yes, the Pride Parade is an abomination, and they're saying if you read that section of Leviticus, it says it is an abomination, and they shall be put to death. Meaning a man who lies with man as with a woman. There was a Catholic bishop this week, I think it was in Switzerland, who quoted this and said, here's the reason that we're against same-sex marriage, end of case. And he quoted that, and he quoted the whole thing, including, they shall be put to death. And then I shouldn't have done that. I don't really think they should be put to death. But if you take the Bible literally, that is what it says. Of course, you also can't eat shellfish and do a lot of
it's this hypocrisy. And I was reminded of that with Chris Christie this week, who stands up and says, I'm a good Catholic, but I've practiced contraception and not just the rhythm method. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. We needed to hear that. But he says, but I still think I'm a good Catholic, and I feel fine about what I do. But he is certainly not following
But it's not okay for you.
Yeah, exactly. He'll hold some people to some biblical mandates, but not himself to the anti-contraception rule.
I approve of what Ian McKellen does when he goes into a hotel room and they have those Gideon Bibles. He tears out the page of the Bible that has that piece of the Levitical code as a protest.
I think there are a couple of other pages he needs to remove,
yes,
too.
indeed. And everybody needs to, come on. I mean, come on. Who takes every single word of the thing literally? It's ridiculous.
Some people claim to.
Well, I would say if you do, you got a problem, you know, and I think it's a psychological problem if you take every single word of the thing literally. And that is what the court is going to try to find out about Yishai Schlissel, because they've ordered a psychological evaluation of him. Is he crazy? He seems crazy to us, right?
Yes.
You know, he seems like a madman.
He seems, there is also in the Bible, thou shalt not kill. So perhaps there are some contradictory mandates in the Bible.
Wow.
Now, this horrible event has also sparked a member of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament,
Itzik Shmuley,
to come out as a gay man. He said, I can't stay silent and hidden anymore. We have a picture of him.
He says, I can't stay silent when the knife is raised on my community. So he was finally owning up to himself.
Yes.
The Jewish home chair and education minister, Natalie Bennett, responded by ordering massive increases in funding for the gay youth organization there to prevent acts of incitement versus the gay community. But, you know, the Netanyahu government, the Likud government, is in coalition with these ultra-orthodox parties. Mm-hmm. And that we reported a couple of weeks ago that they were unable to pass a simple LGBT rights bill in the country, and they've done some progressive things in Israel because of that, because of their union with these ultra-Orthodox parties, which won't stand for it.
Well, that is how these very minority, very right-wing parties have powers.
In Germany.
In Australia.
In the United States of America with the Republican Party.
Yeah, the Conservative Party in New York State.
Right.
helps the Republicans get elected and therefore controls the right-wing nature of the New York State Senate.
The tail that wags the dogs. Jerusalem Open House, which is the LGBT group there, wants access to religious schools when they do this education about gay people. And they had a rally for tolerance on Saturday with the Israeli president. What else about this?
Or shall we turn to the stories of violence in the United States?
I mean, just that, Israel has a huge problem with these religious zealots, even though, it's a Jewish state, and they're starting to, yes, and they're starting to crack down on them. Well, it's funny when you not funny when you read this. I mean, we have weekly shootings of mass murder in this country, but these people who seem to have almost no ideology. They just do it because they go crazy and they want to kill people. They don't even seem to have. When you go into a theater, you don't even. There's no reason. You just do it. That's what seems to happen all the time.
Some of them think they're hearing the voice of God to tell them to do it.
Yeah. But, I mean, this seems to have focused people on how virulent anti-gay hatred can be.
Certainly. And we have seen not quite as drastic examples of it, but a long list. It's August. It should be a slow news month, but what we find rising to the top of the news this week are a lot of stories of violence. Starting on Staten Island, where the New York City Police Department was called to a house early in the morning.
This was on June 19th.
For the report of a fight between two brothers. The fight had actually ended an hour earlier by the time they got there, and they knocked on the door, and the brother who lived there answered the door, a gay man,
Louis Falcone,
and nothing was going on at that point, and yet the cops dragged him out of the house, beat him up, yelled gay slurs, anti-gay slurs at him, as you can see, he ended up in the hospital.
And this would not be a story. This happened on June 19th. If the neighbor across the street, and that's the picture that was there on the left, through her window was filming all this from her cell phone. And you can see the police just piling on this guy.
He ended up with a broken nose, 2 black eyes, facial cuts, and he had a bad foot. He had his foot in a cast or something. They stomped on his foot.
No, he said, I just had my foot operated on, and so they stomp on the foot. Allegedly. Now, again,
he's suing for
$25 million.
Yeah.
The cops allegedly called him an effing faggot. Don't let his blood get on you. He probably has AIDS. The faggot. It is captured on video. The police also threatened to kill his dog during this. Now
this is for no reason. None.
Well, the police. Their story is, he spit at us through the screen. In our faces.
Yeah, that's highly likely.
That's their story.
Highly likely.
That is their story.
And that's certainly a reason to drag him out of the house and beat the crap out of him and scream obscenities at him and stomp on his foot. Yeah.
This is what
threaten to kill his dog.
This is what African Americans go through every day of the week in this country.
Exactly.
In fear. I mean, I listened to a long tape on the New York Times about just average African Americans talking about what they have to go through all the time, looking over their shoulders, worrying about a stop whenever they got driving, especially if they have a nice car, all this kinds of stuff. And well, so here it is on Staten Island again, the scene of the Eric Garner choking and death.
And a similar story from Galveston, Texas, where a gay man, Jesse Jacobs, 32 years old, had turned himself in to serve a 30-day sentence for DWI. He had been stopped driving under the influence. He was sentenced to 30 days. He goes and turns himself in at the prison, and he brings with him his medication he's on. He's on Xanax for an anxiety disorder. He's been on it for 10 years, which is not a great idea. But nonetheless, and when you're on Xanax for 10 years, you are addicted to Xanax. But he had a prescription. He brought the prescription. He brought the drugs and told them, I need this. This is my medication. Well, he gets in there, and they won't give him his medication. Right. And they have a prison doctor who says, oh, he doesn't need this. And he ends up dead. He is dead. because the detox from Xanax is really severe. And he's a dead man because they wouldn't give him his Xanax.
Absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
All right, in Georgia, a guy named Christopher Dukes kidnapped the partner of his ex-partner, Ashley Battle, a man, and killed Randall Kinnard, 33, in the car. He's basically finds him, get in the car, drives off, shoots him, then takes him to a house that they used to have together.
He and the ex.
Yes, and the ex to burn the house down, and then decides maybe I'll kill myself, which he does. It was a whole revenge plot.
Terrible.
This was started out in Macon, Georgia, ended up in Houston County, Georgia. A really horrible story. And there were wonderful comments about this Randall online from his friends. Apparently a very beloved figure.
Mm-hmm. In SoHo, New York, in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, gay married couple who were the first men married at West Point.
They were both West Point. We have a picture of them. They were both West Point students.
Yeah.
And we do have that picture somewhere. Yes. It'll come up. There they are. They are. Well, their names are Daniel and Larry Lennox-Choate.
And so they're in Soho, and they stop into a bodega to shop for something. And this guy comes in and evidently identifies them as gay and starts slugging them.
With anti-gay slurs.
Yes.
He goes, and Larry, he was punching at Daniel. Larry retaliated and posted on Facebook, "He left covered in his own blood with his tail between his legs, and I tossed him to the street like the coward loser he is." So now there's been no arrest of this guy. There is an investigation. Larry said, "Don't mess with us. We had plebe boxing lessons."
Yeah.
And we know how to defend ourselves.
Yeah, but he also appropriately expressed concern for those who have not had plebe boxing lessons and who are attacked like this and cannot fight back, and are the victims, as we've pointed out in other stories, of vicious attacks.
Can we give them some good news?
No, I have several more.
Well, this isn't related to that.
Okay.
The NYPD does say that anti-gay attacks are down 20% this year.
Okay, but those are reported attacks.
I know.
And
we'd report it if it went up.
Yes.
So let's report it that they saying at least that it went down.
Okay, so far. Brett Jones, who was an out gay former Navy SEAL, went back to the Middle East as a contractor in Afghanistan when he got out of the Navy. And he is now telling the story that he was fag-bashed by other contractors and CIA members in Afghanistan who called him names continually and abandoned him in the desert for a while. And it's a gruesome story of how, in spite of Don't Ask, Don't Tell being repealed and all this lovey-dovey stuff about the military, et cetera, there is still a lot of homophobia going on in these settings.
Well, I don't know if this will help, but I read this week that the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce has a new partnership with the CIA to recruit a more diverse workforce.
Oh, I've been doing that for years. A couple of small stories. The Ohio State University marching band is in trouble. Someone has revealed their songbook, which is full of anti-gay, anti-Semitic, misogynist song lyrics. Yes. It had been kept secret. They had said to each other, "Don't let this get out." But then they interviewed some of these guys who had written this, and they said, "Oh, you know, I really enjoyed singing these songs on the bus, and they were really fun." They were, you know, they would take a popular tune and they would write new lyrics about the Holocaust, making fun of Jews being killed.
There are limits.
And of course, a lot of anti-gay stuff.
I was at a
Ohio State.
I was at a gay benefit once, and the comedian, I will not say his name probably because I can't remember it. I was going
to say, why not?
This is 15 years ago. and he starts making Anne Frank jokes at this gay benefit. He's gay.
Yeah.
And he's making these Anne Frank jokes, and I shouted out, "Stop this!" No, and we got into a fight. And how dare you? This is my routine. I'm funny. I'm just being funny. This is just a joke. No, it's not just a joke, and I'm not going to be silent about it. Good grief. There are limits.
You see a lot of comedians on TV defending their right to be politically incorrect.
Who's the big one now? Jerry Seinfeld.
Yes.
And he directed Colin.
Whoopi does it too.
He directed Colin Quinn in his new show, and he's put Colin Quinn under his spell. And Colin Quinn spends the whole last part of the show telling a stupid, politically incorrect joke, which just fell flat because it's what's happened to the playwright David Mamet, who has gone to the right wing and now writes stupid stuff at this point. He used to be a very good playwright, David, but now you're enthralled to an ideology.
Well, I think it's a lack of imagination.
Yes.
It's lazy and stupid.
Yes.
The Unitarian Universalist Church in Danbury, Connecticut, hung out a rainbow flag after the Supreme Court decision for same-sex marriage, and it was burned up. The cops said, oh, it's just vandalism, not a hate crime, because there was no note left. So it's just vandalism. The church dedicated a new rainbow flag.
Are we on church news? Are you done with violence?
I am done with violence for the moment.
Let's stay with the churches for a while.
Okay.
Well, the Catholic school teacher, Margie Winters, outside of Philadelphia there, who was fired from Waldron Mercy Academy, she collected 22,000 petitions asking for her job back. The Philadelphia Archdiocese says, well, the school's not under our jurisdiction. We have nothing to do with it. The petition was to them. But we support the decision to fire her.
We're proud of the school for upholding Catholic values.
And, there are these great debates online after these stories saying, well, I'm a parent there, and I'm glad they got rid of her, and I represent the majority, and others saying, oh, no. They're fighting with each other.
Good.
All these people.
Good. Let them fight it out. Let it come to their hometown. Let them confront this directly.
Well, she was a religion teacher.
And I'm waiting to see what comes out of as the Republican candidates are debating in Cleveland tomorrow night as we tape. The reason they're in Cleveland is because the Republican National Committee is holding its summer meeting there this weekend. And a right-wing nut from Michigan has offered a few anti-gay resolutions.
He's apparently not very popular there, but he is...
He's not even popular in Michigan.
But he has introduced things that put them on the spot.
Yes.
And as Jesse Helms used to do, people hated Jesse Helms, but they always voted with him.
Well, that's the thing. They tend to take the path of least resistance, which is throwing us under the bus.
So his resolutions encourage schools to teach harmful aspects of the gay lifestyle. Hey, you're going to teach the good stuff about gays, you got to teach the bad stuff about gays. And
That's his line, not ours.
Strips the United States courts of their ability to hear cases about marriage.
Good luck with that. Of course, that's what half the Republican presidential candidates are proposing, too.
Well, there's another one that is meant to counter him in some way, some other resolution meant to counter him in some way.
Meanwhile, 5 major national organizations have published something called Schools in Transition, a guide for supporting transgender students in K through 12 schools. This is a sort of best practices guide. You can get it online by going to nclrights.org, the National Center for Lesbian Rights. And there you can find this new guide for supporting transgender students in K through 12 schools.
Yeah, they're going to have some kind of an online Google chat about it, I think, in the middle of August. I think it's August 18th, but check on their website. If this is your issue, that you want to make your school safer for transgender students, you can do that.
That is not the right Chiron there. That is probably the next thing we were doing. No. It's the NCL. There we go. Transgender Student Guide. nclrights.org. So, this subject is becoming more and more common in schools at lower grade levels, and so it's a great thing that they are publishing this guide. Now, what the next Chiron was referring to is a couple of things. The Transgender Law Center is starting a national storytelling campaign called Truth that is going to publish stories of transgender people, kids, their families and friends. They've started this with they've jump-started it with some stories already. If you go to transgenderlawcenter.org, you can read the stories that are there or participate by putting up your own story. And the other phrase there, it says survey. The Transgender Law Center is also updating a survey that was done 4 years ago in 2011, a national survey of transgender people and their issues and experience. And they had about 6,000 people participate 4 years ago. Now they've already got 12,000 people committed to participate. And the survey is open to more. So if you would like to participate in this new survey, which will make a lot of the reality of people's lives clearer, which will affect public policy and what people propose. It's all at transgenderlawcenter.org.
Okay. Ann and I are looking forward not having to protest the St. Patrick's Day parade in March. If the new committee for the parade comes through, it's now headed by John Leahy, who was the head of Quinnipiac College. He's been on the committee for years, and he's defended their exclusion of gays, but he wants to add a second gay group, and our issue is you need to add an Irish LGBT group if it's going to work, not just a corporate group like out at NBC, which they had last year, if you want to get everybody in and you want to get us off your back.
So we're anticipating an announcement in what, September?
That's all we know.
So stay tuned to see who the second out LGBT group of the St. Patrick's Day parade is.
Maybe we'll have to go up to Boston because they let a gay group in last year, but then the guy who is one of the heads of it says not everybody was there for that vote, and I want to change that, so we'll see. Come on, folks. Ireland has come around, can't you?
Did it hurt you last year to have a gay group in?
Right.
Interesting issue. Campus Pride, which is a national organization working for LGBT people on college campuses mostly, has asked the Common Application, which is the organization that people apply to college. They fill out an application. In my day, you applied to 3 colleges.
Yes.
Now people apply to 20 colleges.
I think I just did 2, but all right.
Well, good for you. But because this has expanded so much, they have what is called the Common Application. You fill this out, it gives all your financial request information and all your transcripts and your essays and everything else. And that one common application is distributed to all your the colleges you're applying to. I don't know if it covers every college, but that's one way to do it. So a few years ago, in 2011, Campus Pride and others asked the people who administer the Common Application to add questions about sexual orientation and gender identity to the Common Application voluntarily, optional questions,
sure,
so that colleges would have a better idea of who their students were and would be able to have services appropriate to their student body. They were rejected in 2011. They are again asking 4 years later to have optional questions put on the application, which seems to me appropriate. No one is required to answer these questions.
I mean, is there like pushback from the right wing about, delving into these areas, or what is it?
I think people are nervous about it.
We've not been able to get good data over the years because the right wing has always gone to Congress and said, this is an outrage, you shouldn't be studying this, you shouldn't be doing this.
Well, there's that, but there's also been concern across the board, I think, about the accuracy of the answers and people's willingness to answer these questions. But if the questions are optional and what you're doing is making clear some part of the population and perhaps extrapolating that if these people are willing to answer the question, there are undoubtedly more who aren't but who are there.
Right.
Then you can plan your services more appropriately.
All right.
So we'll see what the Common Application says and let you know.
Let's go to Texas for a couple of stories.
Okay.
Pastors there in Houston are fighting the Equal Rights Ordinance, and it's likely to be on the ballot as a result in November. And they are now, because they got a ruling from the Texas Supreme Court that said that the stopping of it was mishandled. So they're suing Anise Parker, the out lesbian mayor, who's in her last term, saying that she tried to deny voters' rights and intimidate clergy. She dismissed this as a political stunt, but they're serious. And there is an election this year. Apparently everybody's courting the gay group down there, to get the endorsement. And they're all
including one closeted candidate.
Yes, did we have the name of the closeted candidate?
No, I've forgotten it. Okay. So then I can't be accused of outing him. All right. But he's a pretty well-known closet case. But he used to be very anti-gay.
Pretty unsuccessful closet case.
He has, yes, except when you forget his name. But he has changed his tune and he's become more pro-gay. Anise Parker is term limited, so they can go after her all they want, but she's going to be out of office soon anyway.
And if you'd like to know the whole history of everything that's gone on down there, Dallas Voice, which is the newspaper there, has been publishing since 1984, and they've now archived their papers in PDF form, but searchable at the University of North Texas. And I'll include that's a rather elaborate link in our email. If you write to me, andyhum@aol.com, I'll send you this direct email. Otherwise, you could Google UNT Digital Library, and you'll probably find it there.
Dallas Voice archives you're looking for. All right, marriage news?
Well, also in Texas, the Attorney General there, Ken Paxton, who wants Christians to have the right to discriminate against gays in various ways, was arrested on 3 felony counts of securities fraud, sic semper tyrannis.
Well, in Texas, they are pretty much following the Supreme Court decision legalizing same-sex marriage, but there are little offshoots of this that are getting a little tricky. There is a guy who actually is fatally sick, is not expected to survive much longer, but his husband died in January before the Supreme Court decision, and they were married, I think, in New Mexico in 2014, and the surviving partner, who is near death, wants to be recognized on his late husband's death certificate.
Yep.
It affects inheritance rights, and it's an interesting question that evidently these states are going to be expected to retrospectively recognize these marriages.
Right.
And also, a lawsuit has been filed by a lesbian couple who are trying to get recognition of both of them on the birth certificate of their child in Texas. These are all Texas stories.
Well, and then there's Pennsylvania, where a judge recognized a same-sex common law marriage based on a 2001 commitment ceremony. Mm-hmm. This is going to be interesting. They're going into the past.
Again,
to
one of the partners has died, and her widow is now entitled to benefits, according to the judge, based on their common law marriage, as he's calling it. Interesting testimony from the IRS commissioner in the Senate. He was asked by Utah Senator Mike Lee, who is a Republican, at a
Very
hearing.
anti-gay.
Yes. Senator Lee said, look, Bob Jones University lost its tax exemption because it was opposed to interracial dating.
Did not allow it.
Yes. So what's going to happen if colleges, religious colleges, do not recognize same-sex partners for housing or object to any homosexual relations on campus? And the IRS commissioner said, well, we're not going to revoke anyone's tax exemption yet, but it's certainly a question that is going to be considered.
It is an open question. Some of the Catholic universities have already come around on the issue and said, because they want to retain good faculty, and a lot of them are gay. So, and also they don't want to lose everybody else who sides with their gay colleagues.
But here's another issue, which is there a non-discrimination law in place? Because when you're talking about interracial dating, you are violating a no race discrimination federal law and undoubtedly state and local laws. But in, for instance, Louisiana, a lesbian couple in Houma, Louisiana, were denied a wedding cake by a local bakery, but there is no state non-discrimination law and no local law in that town.
Yes,
now,
but the ACLU said that they're not protected in Houma. But I would say, what about sex discrimination, and what about bringing a case on that basis?
Well, the EEOC decision that we have talked about for the last couple of weeks had to do with employment.
Yes.
So now we will see whether that can be extended to public accommodations.
Well, but they're not. But again, at least the ACLU is saying we don't have a case here.
Yeah, because there is no non-discrimination law, but they may change their minds and decide to pursue it as a sex discrimination clause. We don't know. And similarly tricky in Kentucky. Rowan County Clerk Kim Davis, who has been raising a stink for quite a while now about having to issue licenses to same-sex couples and refusing to, is now suing Kentucky Governor Steve Beshear for infringing her religious freedom by firing her for not being willing to issue licenses.
She says, I am a conscientious objector.
Yes.
Like a non-combatant who cannot shoulder a rifle. That's what you're comparing us to?
Well, you know, where do you draw the line and how do you define these things?
Well, I'll tell you where they're drawing the line in Alabama. The state Senate committee there approved a bill to do away with state-issued marriage licenses. Can you imagine this? Spouses would file a signed marriage contract at the probate offices. Now, to pass this thing, this is in the special session, it needs 2/3, but, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions here, it is Alabama. So I guess it's possible.
Well, it failed in the House before, and now it's been revived in the Senate, so it would still have to go back to the House, I think. But what are they accomplishing by this?
The probate judge is still going to have to handle the marriage contract, but I can't touch it. I can't touch it.
You know, same-sex couples are going to be able to submit marriage contracts.
I'll get cooties.
As opposite-sex couples do. And the real problem is who's going to recognize these marriage contracts? Are they going to have trouble with other states recognizing them if they're not?
Do you have to have a marriage license?
Know.
You have to have a marriage?
I don't know.
What do I get this marriage?
I don't know. They're just twisting themselves in knots for no good reason. And in Maine, the Supreme Judicial Court has announced or decided or ruled that the National Organization for Marriage, yes, they are still in business, must reveal the names of their major donors. They've already paid a $50,000 fine. They've already been required to register as a ballot question committee, and now they are again being required to reveal the names of their donors.
Well, for them, this goes back to the 2009 referendum campaign, which they won. We subsequently won same-sex marriage there later after a very great grassroots campaign. But here in New York, the NYCLU and family planning advocates were denied the privacy of their donor lists by the State Ethics Commission.
Again, they're required to reveal the names.
But, you know, in order to be exempt from this, you have to show the donors will face harm and reprisals.
Well, that's exactly NOM's position. You know, some in the Prop 8 fight in California, somebody got a mailbox trashed, and they've used that for the last 7 years to
yes, they have,
to claim that they would be facing great harm if they revealed their donor names. They also claim, because the rule is that if your donors give to you as a general organization and then you decide to use the money wherever, the donors have not made a direct contribution to that fight and their names don't have to be revealed. So that's NOM's claim, and the court is saying nonsense. They knew exactly what they were donating to, and you were doing the main fight.
All three of you, because that's they only have 3 donors, right?
That's why they're fighting so hard, because those 3 donors don't want their names revealed.
It's not me.
Although I think we know their names already.
Anyway.
well, NAM isn't shutting down, but the American Foundation for Equal Rights is, which is the California organization that was founded by Chad Griffin and Rob Reiner and hired Olson and Boys to do the Prop 8 case.
6 years ago.
Yeah.
So they're closing up, and they're throwing their votes to HRC, where Chad went.
Yes, their resources, I think. I thought their closing press release was quite annoying because they basically claim credit for legalizing same-sex marriage, which is ridiculous.
I know. We're all in this together. Can't
Please.
we spread the fame? What else? And then bear with me on this Ruth Bader Ginsburg story.
Okay.
First, she gave a speech. She said reproductive freedom is in a sorry state in the United States. She said the death penalty is arbitrary and error-prone. But on the marriage decision, she said, if I'd written it, I would have expanded the equal protection holding. Kennedy briefly mentioned that, but focused on marriage as a fundamental right and liberty arguments. So she's talking out. And so
I wasn't crazy about Kennedy's opinion too.
We need more Ruth Bader Ginsburgs on the court.
It's amazing the way she speaks out.
In St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Lieutenant Governor there signed a governor's executive order that enforces marriage equality. And yes, okay.
Okay. Moving back to the international scene, violence in Jerusalem, violence also in El Salvador, where 4 police officers beat the head of the Association of Transgender Men after their big Pride March. He ended up with a broken eye socket, a fractured skull. Then there was a break-in and theft at the office of a lesbian activist. El Salvador is not a safe place, I think, not having been there, but from the reports I read.
Iran is not a safe place for gay people, and the official news agency there, Rahyab News, linked Peter Tatchell, the great British gay activist, to MI6, the British spy agency, and to Arab terrorism, also emphasizing his gay activism to discredit his advocacy for Iran's persecuted Awazi Arab minority. On the other hand, the National Gay and Lesbian, I mentioned that, the CIA thing, yes.
And what do you think of Obama's speech to young African leaders at their annual conference in D.C.? He talked about homophobia in their countries being as illegitimate as racism. He said,
treating people differently for who we love is the mindset that leads to racism. You can't complain when somebody does that to you and then you're doing it to someone else. And he was apparently warmly received by this group of young Africans safely in Washington for their conference.
In Colombia, there are interesting developments on marriage. In 2011, the Constitutional Court, I've said 2011 several times tonight, the Constitutional Court ruled that the country had to do something to legitimize same-sex relationships. Well, the legislature refused and the government did nothing, and so the Constitutional Court has taken the question back and is now holding a hearing, or a series of hearings, on same-sex marriage. They brought in a lot of experts from the United States and elsewhere, pro and con, including Nan Hunter with the Williams Institute and the right-wing Alliance Defending Freedom.
Yes, they did.
So they are on the verge of making a new decision about same-sex marriage in Colombia.
Apparently what's pushing them is what's happening internationally. What happened in the United States, what happened in Ireland, all these places is making everybody get with the program.
That and the fact that their ruling from 4 years ago has been ignored. In Tokyo, Japan, a second ward will certify same-sex partners. They're slowly getting on board there.
Setagaya, if you're happening to visit.
In Australia, a bipartisan marriage bill will be introduced in the legislature in a couple of weeks. Our side is raising money to run TV ads.
In the Philippines, same-sex couples are suing for the right to marry. There was an earlier petition from a lawyer asking the court to make a ruling on it, but the polling there is really, it's sort of like Alabama circa, 1997 or something.
But Quezon City, where couples showed up and applied for marriage licenses and were rejected, has a sexual orientation non-discrimination law.
True.
So their suit claims that they are being discriminated against. I was quite struck by the quote of one of them who said, "Instead of doing nothing, we wanted to start the fight about equality." Exactly.
And in Mexico, in addition to all the progress that is being made step by step in various places on same-sex marriage in the states, the Supreme Court is taking up a state ban in one of the states, Campeche, on adoptions by same-sex couples.
But thousands of, I assume, religiously enticed people held a big march across in various cities across the country against homosexuality, sex education, contraception. There is a right wing fighting back in Mexico, even as we advance.
Some pride stories?
Well, first, another marriage story. In Gibraltar, the chief minister has announced that he is pro-marriage equality, but the method of how they'll advance on that is being debated.
Okay.
Yes, pride.
Well, Jamaica is having its first LGBT pride in Kingston, and the mayor is
Tough town.
is speaking there. Now, how are they doing this? They're going to have a flash mob in the park, an art exhibit and performances, a dance party, but they're considering this a turning point. And Human Rights Watch sees a change in the government response to abuses.
This is the first one, and it has been, we've had nothing but negative stories from Jamaica for a long time, except the local paper has editorialized on behalf of...
And the brave people who've been speaking out.
Absolutely. And the poor people who've been attacked.
And trying to do commercials with mothers and things like that to alert things.
Yes.
Now, Uganda is having its 4th annual Pride Festival. It began today as we're taping on Wednesday in Kampala. They're saying it's not a protest but a celebration organized by a guy named Richard Lusimbo. Now, the events are invitation only because of security. And he rejects the idea that he's brave. He says, "I'm privileged to be in a position to support all the thousands of gay people in this country." But Kapia Kayoma, who's a senior researcher at Political Research Associates, it's a think tank that monitors anti-gay stuff in Africa, says and he's been on the show, he says he's conflicted about pride, the way it's done. He says it increases visibility, but it perpetuates a falsehood that African sexual minorities are copies of their Western counterparts. You know, I mean, don't we all want the same things? You know, love, sex, fellowship.
Can't they engage in self-determination in Uganda?
Etc.
A little good news from the Gambia. 3 men who had been arrested and charged with aggravated homosexuality have been acquitted by a court and released after 8 months in prison.
Stop the presses.
Oh, my God.
In Russia, on the other hand, it's business as usual in St. Petersburg, where the police detained gay rights protesters. One was accused of cursing in public. He denies it. The veterans of the Russian airborne forces were there. They tore up the protest signs and said, "Let them do what they want in America, not Russia."
And business as usual in Catholicism. In Spain, the Catholic bishop won't let a transgender man be the godfather to his nephew. He can be a spiritual godfather, but not a real godfather.
And in Kenya,
Why?
In Kenya, 700 evangelical pastors, and they're pesters also, wrote to Obama telling him to take his disgusting homosexual agenda and shove it.
Nice.
And just tripping back to an American bishop for a while in Fargo, North Dakota, they're very happy about the Boy Scouts going to let them still discriminate in their troops there.
But I also read something about them wanting to give up having Boy Scout troops anyway. It's very confusing. Yeah. But let's move on to AIDS and health news.
Yes.
There's going to be a new publication this fall, Transgender Health, a new peer-reviewed journal. Keep your eyes open for that. And meanwhile, the Transgender Law Center, which is much in the news this week here, is doing not only its national survey of transgender people, but a survey of HIV-positive transgender people called Positively Trans. So again, if you go to transgenderlawcenter.org, you can participate in that survey for those who are HIV positive, a needs assessment survey.
You probably saw the national news that there's been a big Legionnaire's disease outbreak in the Bronx, New York, to the north of us here. 86 cases, 7 deaths, mostly older people, and they say people with HIV/AIDS are at particular risk. Now, it's not spread person to person, but from contaminated cooling towers, apparently. Obama signed his executive order on the national AIDS strategy for the next 5 years, similar to the old strategy, except much more emphasis on Truvada use, which the feds recommend. And, you know, Gilead says that they only survey 39% of U.S. pharmacies and have got about 8,500 prescriptions so far.
It's a slow uptake.
But the data on it.
Unlike women, men don't want to be on a daily pill.
Well, they say obviously daily adherence is completely preferable. Missing 1 dose occasionally, they say, is not going to be a big problem. There's no evidence that it leads to more risky behavior. No evidence it's causing HIV to mutate. So anyway. And LGBT groups are standing up for Planned Parenthood. I think that's great.
I do think that's great. And Chicago is going to cover gender reassignment services for city employees. And New York State is finally authorizing growers and dispensers of medical marijuana, which must start doing business within 6 months.
But you can't smoke it.
No.
Okay.
Entertainment news. Thank you to Seth Meyers for having the cast of Fun Home on and Alison Bechtel. And they performed the I'm Changing My Major to Joan
our favorite song.
A lot of lesbian kissing and sex right there on NBC Late Night.
You know, we're just going to have to close down shop here.
The world is changing. Yeah. Not changing, though, is Caitlyn Jenner, who you may remember in her interview with Diane Sawyer said...
I'm a conservative Republican.
Yeah, sort of an offhand comment. We all went, "Whoa, well, we understand," because, of course, she's hanging out with the Kardashians and
jocks.
And that's the... world she comes from. So on the second episode of I Am Kate, which continues to be a fascinating show, she goes on a road trip with some other transgender women. And they're all talking about, they start talking to her about homeless youth and people who need help. And she says, well, you know, they just want an easy buck. They want a handout. They want services given to them. They don't want to work. It was shocking. And the women she was with were shocked. And congratulations to the show for showing how shocked the other people were and showing her saying this.
They said, look, she can be as conservative as she wants, but many of these programs are needed for transgender people to survive. I mean, Jenner is apparently herself worth an estimated $100 million.
I'm sure. Off of the Kardashians show. You can see all episodes of this, by the way, on Amazon Prime or Roku, as well as the E! Entertainment Network. Are we going to have time to get to these clips?
If you'd like to.
Well, let's start.
I have a couple of other announcements, but we can save them to another time.
Let's do, because they're not going to. We're going to show you clips from the upcoming movies Stonewall and Freeheld, opening September 25th and October 2nd, but we have time, so we'll save them for next week.
Yeah. Well, so some other announcements.
Yeah.
Oh, well, how about Kate Pearson?
Of the B-52s.
She's, not to confuse you, B-52s. She's 67. She married her partner of 12 years, Monica Coleman. Monica's not 12.
In Hawaii.
Monica's not 12. She's a peer.
They're wearing flowers and they're with palm trees.
The whole band turned out for it.
That's Kate on the left and Monica on the right.
She's a long way from their debut at CBGB's.
Yeah, but congratulations to them.
All right. The Leslie Lohman Gallery has a new exhibit curated by Jim Saslow, an art historian, on what gay people do when we're not having sex. It's called, that's what they say it is. It's called On the Domestic Front, Scenes of Everyday Queer Life. It opens August 14th there at 26 Worcester in Soho.
Anne watches television. Andy goes to the
I watch
theater.
TV. I watch different TV. I watch a lot of old movies.
Yeah, we'll save those clips, but I'll tell you about another movie now out on video on demand or DVD called Seashore, about teenage boys in Brazil who end up getting together, which I'm sure will be of interest to some of our viewers.
What was that? What was the name
Seashore.
of it? What was the name with God in it?
City of God.
Yeah, City of God.
That was a wonderful movie.
Yeah, about the teens there.
Yeah, rough.
There's a new choral work. It's not coming out till March, but it sounds fascinating. Supreme Justice: The Battle for Gay Rights. It's a choral piece with an orchestra coming to Pace University. It includes portrayals of Scalia and Ginsburg, who are the two big opera fans on the court, and best of friends.
And I want to mourn the death of Ingrid Sishi,
Yes.
who was very well known in the fashion and art worlds and was the editor of Interview magazine and wrote for The New Yorker and Vanity Fair.
Yeah.
I met her during the AIDS crisis when she was hanging out with ACT UP and following what we were doing, and she and I did a series of interviews. She lived around the corner from me and would have me over on a Sunday afternoon and talk at length about ACT UP and about AIDS. And when I'd run into her thereafter, she would apologize for not having written this up. But I know that what we talked about informed everything she did, and that she was a smart, thoughtful person who really, in spite of her emphasis on fashion, I would say.
Very close to Robert Mapplethorpe.
Yes, and married to Sandra Brandt, and very out, of course, for many years as a lesbian, and very influential in the art and fashion worlds, and a major force who had a huge impact and will be missed.
Yes. By the way, that couple that was in the Hillary Clinton's video,
Yeah.
the gay couple who was like proclaiming love, they did get married there in Chicago. It was a big, big write-up in the New York Times.
Yes. One of them had worked for Obama. So the fact that Hillary included them in her video, I thought was interesting.
How about that Joe Biden? Thinking of running for president now. Apparently, Beau, that was his deathbed wish, is that his father run for president at the age of 72.
Yeah.
Anything else? We got about a minute.
Oh, so now we're short?
No, we're a little short.
After not running the movie
we're
clips?
short. You know, the right wing, by the way, this is a story I'm going back to, this week was celebrating that they issued the new guidelines for development by the UN, you know, across the world, and they were just so proud that they kept abortion and any mention of LGBT out of it. The guy from Kenya who presided over this was overcome with emotion as he closed the negotiations. With tears in his eyes and choking up, he recounted how Pope Francis continuously prodded us in recent weeks. He said, you know, now I'm sure that Francis was for some good development goals, but also, with Vatican status, keeping the gays out.
LGBT Democrats welcome the potential Biden run. There's the latest headline.
Well, I mean, you know, it's pretty tough to run if you're anti-gay. I mean, what about, well, I don't want to mention any names. Well, because I'm not 100% sure of all their positions.
Oh, okay.
But we'll see.
All
I'll
right.
tell you afterwards.
All right, and we'll discuss the Republicans and their debates next week. See you then. Bye.
I wasn't sure about Webb.